this makes our understanding of what change. So change is occurring everywhere, but the only thing is that our understanding of this change is getting more and more skewed and mediated. So I would tend to think, I've been talking the past few months to young people or in many parts of the country. My job takes me to several parts of the country, so I keep talking to young people, and I'm somewhat depressed to find that opinions are getting much more homogeneous. The heterogeneity of opinions and the heterogeneity of views, which one used to see earlier among youth, I think people are getting homogenized. And this is something which is very worrying. But I realize that I think what even my sphere of inquiry is also within this crust, the crust of the solidified lava of European universities which have spread all over the world. But if you scratch this surface, scratch this crust, you will get into a space which I think is somewhat difficult to believe what's happening there. In my university, we run a program called the MPhil in Development Practice. If you excuse me, I'll just take a bottle of water. Students of this MPhil program are supposed to live for about 2 semesters, staggered over 2 years. In tribal areas. So they are supposed to actually go and live with tribal families and work in tribal villages and so on and so forth. As Vice Chancellor of the university, I make it a point to go once a year when these students are in these places. So last June I went to Gumla district in Jharkhand, and what I could see there was actually very heartening, because there's enormous change happening there as well. There is winds of change there. Winds of change not necessarily in using the parameters of change which many of us are talking about. It could use different kinds of parameters, but change there is. And of course, superficially it is also number of motorbikes and number of cell phones and so on and so forth. But and also mushrooming of private schools everywhere, abandoning of government schools. So in a way, like tribal societies are actually beginning to emulate the trend elsewhere in the country as well. There's a dysfunctionality of state and state organizations. There's a certain disconnect which is happening from these locations from the rest of the country. From one point of view, it is very frightening, because it is also almost it is a secession which is actually underway. But at another level, it is also very, in some sense, I think there's a potential there there's a creativity there which I think can unleash changes, and if it is done properly, it can be done probably without violence. And if one is imaginatively trying to intervene there, then probably there is a space for understanding the change and mobilizing the change in a direction which does not really jeopardize the integrity of the whole society. So this is this I would consider certainly as part of this winds of change. There are something like 100+ districts in this country which has practically no civil administration. That's about 1/5 of the total number of districts that we have in this country. I think it's important for us to understand what's happening there. It's important for us to fill the void that exists there. It's important for us to not allow people to appropriate that space and use that cynically for purposes which are destructive. It's important for people like you and I to get more and more interested in that. I would have been happier had I listened to some of these accounts in the presentations in the morning. But I'm sure that it must have crossed. Some of you said that we didn't have the time to write some of these things, but it's important that how we prioritize even the kind of change that we see around us. I really feel growth by itself is, growth, economic growth by itself as an engine for change is a folklore, I think, which we must begin to question. And there is a need to understand, to go beyond what the growth story tells us. I think it's important for us to understand how this unleashing of the enormous energy of aspirations that's happening beneath the crust. I can see the heat of that aspiration even in institutions as insular as universities. And university systems are responding to some extent, but how the manner in which they are responding is interesting. It's the major distinction between, about few decades back, the major distinction between the people who, how do I put it, the social stratification ran along the boundary wall of the university. Those who could, they were inside the university. Those who couldn't, they were outside. Those who have, they were inside. Those who didn't have, they were outside. But today, on the contrary, the university is expanding. The social stratification is within the university. But what has happened to university? University is not a homogeneous entity anymore. There are universities and universities. So the question is not whether kids are going to university. The question is who goes to which kind of university. So that differentiation still remains. Social stratification still remains because university is not intervening to structurally adjust those things. All that we are doing is to incrementally push strata up. I think this is something which, as a university, I would, our young university, we would certainly like to address more seriously. What we are doing, one of the things which we are doing is that we think it's important not to respond merely to market demand. Because an institution which merely responds to a market demand is a polytechnic, not a university. A university's job it is to mobilize demand in an area where there is a social need, when that such a need has not manifested as a demand as yet. So it's jolly well the business of the university to mobilize such a demand. So that is something which the universities, in my opinion, are abdicating. And no university will do it. Only public universities can do it. Because they are disengaged with the concerns of, surpluses, profits and so on and so forth, and therefore I think it's a public university which needs to probably do it. But public system, as you can understand, in this country is under siege. Whether it be public education or public health or public transport, you go to All India Institute of Medical Sciences or Safdarjung Hospital or the government hospital in Allahabad, or you go to Air India or come to Delhi University or to my own, you'll find the difference. You'll find how much under siege we feel we are in terms of the kind of pressure there is to respond to masses, to respond to aspirations, but at the same time you're not able to because you do not have the wherewithal of doing it. You do not have the kind of resources. So I do think that it's about time for, it's not business as usual for at least the system I come from, the university. And we probably need to think beyond the kind of solutions we were used to so far. I would end only by saying the following. Winds of change can actually destabilize societies unless there is a built-in societal, this built-in force which keeps the roots in place. It's always like if I may use a metaphor, a society like individuals have wings as well as roots. wings left to themselves actually can deroot them, uproot them. So it's important for the roots to be intact as well. The tension between roots and wings is a tension which all of us every institution need to really address clearly. Institution, I mean the state, the judiciary, the way, all institutions of the state, the school, the religion, family, all of them. I think it's important for us to address this particular thing. And in this, there I get a cue from the morning's presentation. I think one segment of our society which is actually ensuring how do you put it, the continuing engagement between the root and the wing is women. Somebody mentioned about the advertisement where the woman is boss at work, but where she cooks for her husband and back home, etc. But that probably is a much more crude and superficial way of depicting it. But I really feel the kind of stress and tension that women really put to ensure that these two opposing forces are reconciled in some sense and managed is enormous, and it goes unacknowledged. This, I think, would be an important thought I would like to leave you with. I know these are rambling thoughts. I have no conclusions. I was trying to sort of create a certain disquiet among ourselves and invite us to begin to look at spaces we are not used to looking at. And please, let's understand that we are a minority in this country. People like us, the middle class, they say, is a growing middle class. As you know, Indian middle class has come of age, they say. 150 million people. 150 million people is able to probably, it's more than many countries of Europe, and have the kind of wealth which I think is comparable to many other affluent countries. But all the same, I think located as we are in situations, in physically and culturally, and it is important for us to create, to ensure that there is continuous engagement with the people around us. We can't be living in gated communities. We can't be building 38-story mansions for ourselves among squalor all around. That is not viable. It's not sustainable. So I really feel that it's important for us to begin to look at how we are going to respond to these winds of change. Thank you very much. Honorable Gopal Gowda, Professor Faruqi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my dear students. After listening to Professor Manas Das, I get the sense that probably this lecture is already done, I think, and delivered so well. So I really do not know what more I'll be able to add to what he has said. I'm most grateful that, however, that I was asked to come here to Allahabad, I was given the opportunity of listening to the presentations in the morning and to deliver this or share with you my thoughts related to the winds of change. I'm particularly thankful to the organizers of the Damodarshree National Award for Academic Excellence, and particularly to Professor Alka Agarwal for asking me to be here. I was meditating on this phrase, winds of change, and I realized that it's what they are trying to say, what they are hinting at is not just incremental evolutionary process of change, process of transformation, but rather major transformation, mutations, vicissitudes, major changes that that we are witnessing. We were told a few months back that good times are going to come. So I'm still waiting for the good times to show themselves. So that's part of the winds of change, I presume, at one level. But what through this next few minutes, what I'm trying to convey to you is what with the space which we are able to cognize and sense is not all that there is there in the society. There is a space which is invisible to us and to people like us in this hall, and probably that's something which we need to look at more carefully while contemplating on the winds of change. My vantage point, of course, is a university. In that sense, university has helped create that space, the space in which you and I belong. As we find that much of the change, and this was there in some of the morning presentations which I listened to very intently, much of the change we are talking about in a superficial, commonsensical realm, it's about emulating the West. So the modern West had about 300 years of major influence ever since the beginning of what may be called the Age of Reason. Modern West has been exerting this influence on the rest of the world, as though it's a kind of a role model for change. And they had adopted various ways in which